Great Tuesday. Welcome to the King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my guest today, um, business consultant as well as business founder, Aaron Friedman. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Doing great. Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you.
Now, one of the first questions I love to ask before we get things started to really set the context of, you know, our energy level as we go through the show is to ask the question, what's your energy level in the moment? Your spiritual energy level, be more specific in the moment, being 0, life sucks, to 10, being life is awesome. Where would you say you fit in that
I'd
stuff?
say I'm hanging around a 7, maybe even a 6.5, to be frank.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you answering that question. And the reason I asked that question, because I've learned through all the different podcast meetings and whatnot I've had, that if people get on the call or in a session and they're around a 2 or 3, they're not going to be present, they're not going to be engaged. It's not going to really be a good show or a good discussion. So I always ask it to really kind of set the context. So thank you for indulging me with that.
Absolutely.
And as we begin, one of the things that I really found myself really adopting this ideology as I've gotten older, um, of this concept called fully human. And I'm not the creator of the term. I've heard the people say fully human, but a colleague of mine was the first to actually name the company the Fully Human. And that's where I really became aware of the term. And then as I really grew to understand it, and then I really began to adopt my own meaning because they said it was undescribable or no definition. And I felt that I had to have a definition because my background is system engineering and I have to have a process for how things work. And so I just kind of want to start our conversation off by defining fully human because it's really going to set our discussion, the context of our discussion. So I define fully human as a reclamation, a return to the truth that we're not here to dominate, compete, or prove our worth, but to co-create systems rooted in dignity, truth, and shared purpose. It begins when we shed the labels that divide us and embrace our innate identity as creative, connected, and conscious beings. At its core, fully human leadership invites us to lead with wholeness, multiplying possibility by choosing connection over control and collaboration over competition. So, with that being said, my first question to you, as a leader who builds with both purpose and precision, after reading your LinkedIn bio and some of your posts, what does it mean to you to lead as fully human in this season of your life, beyond categories, titles, and competition?
Um, Interesting. So I guess I would say that I approach it in the sense that even in my taglines is that I'm a human oriented or people oriented leader, but data driven.
Hmm.
I can't say that I remove competition, just to be frank, just because I do believe that competition is part of the human experience and behavior. But it doesn't mean a zero sum, gain or loss, right? I think that competition, at least for me, um, doesn't mean that I have to grind you into the ground, right? But it doesn't mean that I have to, not go out there and do my best in order to allow for other elements to exist, if that makes sense. And so
Absolutely.
for me to be a 100% human leader, it's more the fact of, you know, uh, be empathetic. I think we even talked about this once before, but be kind, not necessarily nice, because nice has a focus on wanting to be liked, which then can actually be detrimental to yourself. Even it's much better to actually seek for kindness, and kindness can be have the hard conversation. Kindness can be like, hey, this isn't a right fit. Kindness can also be like, hey, I don't necessarily see how what your role, experience, whatnot can necessarily get you. So you may not have the, aptitude, but you have the attitude. And like, how do we, explore and celebrate that? Because I can teach most skill sets, right? I can't teach you most things you didn't learn in kindergarten.
Absolutely. I love how you pretty much talked about competition in that way, because I don't want to, by my definition, make it appear that competition is bad.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's not a zero sum game. I feel like it's a very important point to point out. So thank you for saying that. You know, I have a couple other questions I want to get into, but I want to further really define fully human for folks who really they've heard this term for the first time and be curious about what I mean by that. So I would say my short descriptive definition of fully human is that I believe, and again, this is from my experience of being 55 in my 56th year of life, that we were never meant to be reduced to a color, a category, or competition from a race standpoint. We were born fully human, creative, connected, conscious. Being fully human is the one true identity that true equity begins when we shed our labels to return to the identity beneath them. So, with that being said, I want to ask you, in what ways would you say that you build relationships and connections with businesses that's based off aligned purpose and creative goals and desires?
Sure. So I should probably give a little bit of background of how I get involved in business, and so let's start there. So I usually look to into acquisitions, like in a lot of the smaller size businesses, so companies that are doing probably about 1 to 5 million in profits, not revenue but profits. And a lot of these companies are family oriented. A lot of these companies are multi-generation. A lot of the founders of these companies are accidental entrepreneurs. Like they decided, what, I think I can do the job better at being in manufacturing, construction, what have you, services. And then the next thing you know, they're having to try to figure out payroll, right? And so when I look at a lot of these companies and I talk to the folks on the acquisition side, there has to be a catalyst for leaving, right? It's retirement, shiny object syndrome. They want to do something else, right? But at the same time, is they also have employees, they have customers, they have long-term relationships. And so it's not about coming in and trying to beat them up on, necessarily the price and where they're at. I mean, that still has to make sense, but it's not about necessarily like, buying it to flip it in 5 years or flip it in 8 years, right? It's like, how do you acquire, protect and grow? And a lot of that actually comes from a little bit of my own history and family history. My family had a machine shop down in El Paso. We had Texas Motors. We built racing engines and engine replacements. And when my grandfather passed away, the business was handed over to another family member who really didn't want it, and he ran it in the ground, and I ended up in a trailer park. And that had a lasting experience on me. And so when I look at if there is a exit event or equity event or a change event in a company, and that can, we're all going to exit, whether it's our companies or this world. Some of us get to choose, some of us don't. There should be a minimal impact to the people's whose livelihoods actually are dependent on that company. And so what I'm looking for is like, if you're looking to get the highest dollar for your company, I'm probably not the right person. If you care about what happens to your company after the acquisition, then I'm the right person to talk to. Right. So, if you want the highest dollar and you meet the criteria, and that second part is really important. If you meet the criteria of where private equity will be interested in you, that's great. And they'll always pay more, or a strategic partner, or a strategic acquisition. So a competitor, somebody that wants to grow into your industry. But they're not going to care about your people, their legacy, so on and so forth. Their goal is specifically around like, how do I, private equity exists in order to grow and create wealth, right? Strategic partners are buying because you have something that they may or may not have. And as far as the people function, whatnot are there, that's secondary to the thought process. Hopefully that makes a little bit sense.
It does. It does. And I appreciate you talking it through, because as an entrepreneur and creating my own company and working with several other companies with entrepreneurs, that being realistic with your expectations are key. And as you said, a lot of entrepreneurs build companies and they build them from a context of purpose and passion, and then they have a lot of feelings for the company.
Yeah.
And they can mistakenly get into a discussion about finance, about the value of that company when it comes to the valuation, and throw that their personal feelings for the company into that valuation, and mistakenly not understand that that's not what the market is actually interested in.
Well, let's double down on that even further, right? So what most of the times I get to a no, like, out of roughly 50 to 60 companies that get evaluated, probably one or two will actually go through the acquisition. And I end up having very similar conversations of, you haven't treated the company as an asset. You treated it as a paycheck. And so now you're trying to sell it as an asset. And so the value that you got out of it is, put your kids through college, you bought your house, you've done a lot with it, right? But now that you're looking to say, hey, I want to sell it as an asset, you haven't invested the time, the money, the energy, the buildup in order to make that sellable, in a lot of cases sellable. And so I'll give an example. There is a powdered metal manufacturer. And so for those who may not know what that is, but you take really almost like metal in baby powder form, and you press it into a form under immense pressure. So like 120 tons of pressure for a period of time, and then you heat treat it. And that process allows for a lot of wear and tear on that part. And so this particular company made like 70% of all the inner working of handcuffs globally, right? And the owner of that company was 94 years old. And he was still going to work every day. But because he treated it like a paycheck, when we looked to go and take a look to see, like, could we buy this, whatnot, the assets of the company, like the physical equipment, were worth more than he could ever actually get for the company. Most of the employees honestly could have probably made more money working at Starbucks than working at that place. And there was an investment in any leadership management. Like if he went away, the company stopped. Right. And so there's actually about 8 key elements of any company that drives growth and value in the foundations of it. And what tends to happen is, as we go through those 8 key valuation or key points in a company, we'll see whether or not that this company could survive on its own or even be acquired. And so like I run into, and kind of going back to your question, is like, what do you look to in a partnership or, where you're investing, is that the company actually can survive for a period of time without the owner. And if it can't, the valuation of that drops, and we have to evaluate, like, what do we need to do in order to, once we've acquired, build it up. Now, we haven't actually talked about my business consulting side, which is a lot of times I will get asked either in early stage or even late stage companies of, how do we get this to a point to where we want to exit? Right. And so that is a very different process of looking at it from, all right, well, we got to stop playing the sell a discretionary earning game, which is where, I'm running the car through the company, I'm running my phone bill through the company, my vacation through the company. Right. And so it looks like, you're trying not to pay the tax man by having as much expense as possible. So that way it reduces your profit on your tax return, which makes sense. And that's great when the company operates like your paycheck. It makes it very difficult and makes it a discussion point when you go to try to sell. And it gets into some very emotional conversations of like, you only actually have this much profit in the company. The multiple on the company is based off the profit. And so what you've built over the last 25 years is not worth the exit amount that you want. A great example of that is there's a buckle manufacturer that they've run it for 40 years and it's been great. And when we went through it, like they wanted a 5x valuation, and there are manufacturing companies who can demand that, but because they hadn't invested in like a sales team, a marketing team, a leadership team, right, in actually tracking true EBITDA or profits versus running their cars and everything else through it, like we could only get to about a 2x multiple on that company, which was and we both sides was like, look, I'm not looking to offend, I'm just telling you this is what it looks like. Here are the things that need to be true in order to get there. And so going back to that kind, not nice, right? The kind thing to do is actually not just, walk away and say like, yeah, you're crazy, you're not worth it. we actually stepped back and said, look, here's how we did the evaluation. Here are the things that would need to be true in order for this to be worth what you're looking for. And if you want to, keep in touch, and we can touch back in 18 months, based on what we're seeing, you could probably get there in 18 months. Then yeah, if you can get to that, then we're happy to go forward. Right now, there could be a strategic person that looks at that and says, you know what, I'll give them their asking price today because they're buying revenue, and they'll lay everybody off and take over the contracts and they'll go forward. But one of the things that was important to these founders was that their people weren't negatively, impacted.
I love that example, and that brings to mind a question from your experience. And what would you suggest or advise for a company who starts off using the company as a paycheck, but maybe intends at some point to sell it? At what point should they begin to try to merge over from that paycheck mindset and behaviors to more one in line with being able to be sold or acquired?
If they can do it 3 years out, minimum 18 months. And let me explain why. So in a evaluation of most companies, there's a 3-year look back, right? And so if I look back and I'm just going to make some numbers up, you're doing, 500,000 in profit, year one, 600,000 in profit year two. And then in year three, you've got 1.2 million in profit. I'm going to ask what happened. Right. I'm like, and I've seen it where all of a sudden, we, laid off all these people in order to, because largest expense is people. And right. So they're trying to, make the numbers look good. And just to be clear, we're going to catch it. Right. And unless you're committing fraud and lying about the numbers, which unfortunately, going back to where my mental head was at, is like, I'm dealing with someone who literally gave us fraudulent financials and tax returns and other things. And we're trying to unwind that particular investment, which is unfortunate because it's a company that's dates back to the 1800s. It's an commercial electric company. And, unfortunately, the owner who bought it from the original owner or not the original owner, but bought it from the previous owner 5 years ago, has really just pillaged the company, for a polite word. And I see that as well. Unfortunately, we didn't find it until after we took over, we bought 20% of the company. And once we got in there, we started finding multiple bank accounts, and he had taken loans against stuff and pocketed it. He had bought equipment and sold it on Facebook and put it in and really kind of going back to the human element. This is also the risk, right? This particular deal, my empathy got the better of me. And there's some things I could have done to protect ourselves, that, hey, life lesson. But it was really more that, that particular owner is terminally ill. There are 15 people whose, souls that depend on that company operating in order to get paid. And he was expected to go into a surgery actually last month that he has postponed, but he wasn't expected to come out of that surgery. And so we bought 20% in order to stabilize the company in case of. And then we found all the fraud and other stuff, and we're having to, not only take it up with him, but also his lawyer, who was aware of it. And so, that's the risk, right? Is if you truly want to be play by the numbers, zero sum game, I could have just used the opportunity to squeeze him and whatnot. Instead, I said, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice and buy 20% of the company in order to stabilize it in case of, only discover that he had already gotten the company so far upside in debt that he had hidden, that we now have to go and try to reclaim our investment. So that's the risk. So, and by the way, it's a risk I'm willing to take, because at the end of the day, people talk about, oh, I get to sleep at night. I'm like, I'm still stressed out about other things. I still stay up wondering about other things. But at the end of the day, I think Warren Buffett once said it. It was either Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. It's like, take the high road because there will be so few other people there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of things you said I really admire and appreciate. My whole core philosophy and model behind King Connections is connecting and aligning people together for investments, for co-creation, for deals to happen. And when looking for investors, connecting people to impact investors, I always believe that the best advice you can get from someone who says no is if they're willing to explain to you why they say no.
Yeah.
You say, I'm kind enough to tell someone, here's the reason we're saying no. And if you do these things, that to me, from my experience, is worth its weight in gold. Sometimes that's even better than a yes, because that educational experience can help you become much more astute and a better manager of your company and help you grow as a business leader as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like a lot of minds, I look at it as not a no, but not a not yet. Right. Especially in acquisitions, like the stars almost have to align for a company to sell or get bought. Right. And, I hear the term all the time. Oh, if somebody offered me the right amount of money, I'd leave. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. Right. Because that's not, the money isn't enough of a catalyst for you to change, behavior or change one. And as business owners, a lot of our self-identity is wrapped up in the fact of I'm a business owner. And the moment I buy your company, guess what? You're no longer a business owner, right? You don't get to have, Thanksgiving dinner and talk about, and this is just another personal Aaron Friedman thing where it's, revenue is a vanity number. Profit is the real value. And so like, I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting around listening to people going, oh, I have $100 million company. I'm like, is that revenue or profit? They're like, oh, that's revenue. And I'm like, all right, well, what's your profit? And they can't tell me. And it's not a won't tell me, it's can't tell me. They don't track it. They don't understand it. But the moment they sell, you're no longer the founder, you're no longer the company owner, and there's a identity crisis that comes with that. And so when I look and I talk to, when I'm doing my outreach and I'm talking to founder or talking to companies that we want to do for acquisition, the first question I lead to, the first, I'll say intake or interview is like, tell them about your company. What are you up to? And if you're not doing this, what are you doing? Right. And I'm listing for, there's almost a list that we have of like, what is it that I'm looking to hear to know that there's a catalyst that will allow for them to sell. Right. Retirement's a great one. And they'll say, oh, I just want to retire. I'm like, okay, but what are you going to do? Right. And where that comes from is we were, this one still breaks my heart. We had a construction general contracting company up in Illinois, and it was a $15 million acquisition. We had alignment on everything. It was a really good multiple on it. We saw what we would do with the company, had really good foundations, and we negotiated that for about 6 months. And we got to the point of signing, and the owners, and it was two brothers, literally went, I'm not ready to sell. I'm not ready to not be an owner. And I get it. I understand it. And they're like, let's just keep in contact and, let's, reach out to us in 10 years. Right. I had another one, they deployed 30% of all Cisco networking equipment through Latin America. And they had dual headquartered in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Miami. We, were for them. And what I love about what I do is I get to be creative. Like it's not just a, here's a check, whatnot. There's all sorts of ways to stack a deal or align a deal to what an owner wants. I literally had one deal where the guy was like, you have to buy my boat. Like the boat has to, and it was $100,000 boat, just to be clear. But he's like, it was my brother's, unfortunately the brother had passed away. I'm paying for the dock fees. I need it gone. If you'll take the boat, I will sign the deal. And we're like, done. Funny thing is we actually sold the boat for $150,000, but that's a whole other conversation. So, but for this particular one, like, the evaluation on the company was roughly about $8 million. He really wanted to see a path to 15. And we mapped out like, all right, well, how about you keep a percent of it instead of this payment? You keep a percentage of, all profits over a period of time. It's like, look, if you want to, you want a higher reward, you also have to help consume the risk, right? Because of the way that laws in Brazil work, we needed also someone to be the registered agent in Brazil, and he was willing to do that. And so there was a fee, surrounding that. And so we got him to the 15 million that he wanted. It's just, it wasn't going to be day one. It was going to be over 6 years. And when we sat down and got everything to the table, he also just had an existential crisis, which was like, hey, look, my right-hand person, my operator, who's been with me through thick and thin over 10 years, has come to me and says he really wants to buy the business. And by the way, this is one of the questions, like, is there not someone in the business or a family member or somebody, why are you selling to us versus transferring ESOP, so on and so forth, or employee stock option purchase, what have you. Just because of this particular scenario, it's like, I have to honor the fact that he wants to try to raise the capital and make it happen. And we respected that. Also because if that person had left, that was going to be like, I'm not trying to buy a job. We were looking to that operator, that chief operating officer, to be the operator of that company for a period of time. And so if we were to move forward and said, no, let's do it, whatnot, that person had a high probability of leaving, which jeopardized the investment, which didn't make the deal worth it. Right. And so from that point of view, right, that's another case of like, hey, I need to be honorable and give the internal people or internal person or my right-hand person or my cousin or whomever it may be, the opportunity to take over and do that as well. And we're still in talk. I mean, I actually talked to the guy easily like about once or twice a month. That decision was, mid last year. It's also interesting because I actually end up becoming friends with these owners, right? It's never a one and done. And so it's interesting that, and it's funny enough that the operator is now kind of saying, I'm not sure that I want to own it. Right. And so we're supposed to catch up next month about, is there something different we could do?
There's so many questions that come to mind.
I know.
I just really wish time wasn't an essence, because this could easily be a multi-episode show because it's so much to unpack. But what I want to do right now is, for the sake of time, is allow a chance for our sponsor to come in, and we're going to take a break for our sponsor. Then I want to pick up on the other side, because I definitely have to ask questions about your album covers behind you. And I want to get more into who you are and your personality that kind of speaks to the way you do business. So
sure.
We'll pick that up. We'll pick that up on the other side. And so until the other side, now time for our sponsor. Thank you.
The playbook for growing a local business online is simple. Capture new leads, conversationally convert those leads into sales, turn those customers into positive reviews, and then reactivate those customers into repeat buyers. And that's exactly what our platform does. In order to consistently generate new leads, you first need to be found. The quickest way to get search engines like Google to put your business at the top of search results is by having a steady flow of positive reviews. With our platform, you can show up in search and stand apart from your local competition by easily collecting new customer reviews through text. But getting found is only the beginning. Most consumers choose the first business that responds to them. So unless you start conversations with potential customers almost instantly, they'll go somewhere else. That's why we make starting conversations with website visitors as easy as clicking a button, connecting you instantly through text message so the conversation doesn't end when they leave your website. And we bring all your leads, no matter where they come from, into a single conversation stream that supports text, email, video messaging, Google Business Chats, and even Facebook and Instagram DMs, so you can respond faster and more efficiently than ever. When it comes to turning all those conversations into customers, we make collecting payments just another convenient part of the combo, so you get paid faster no matter how they prefer to pay. Next, you'll want to turn your new customers into happy reviews. which is a snap with our new review request quick actions. The more conversations and customers you generate, the easier it becomes to drive repeat business. We make reactivating contacts into customers as easy as, yup, you guessed it, the push of a button. With bulk actions, you can send out text and email campaigns to generate new sales whenever you have a new update, promotion, or story to tell. We make modern online marketing simple. Let's start growing your business today.
And we're back. Thank you for joining us again on the second part of our King Connection podcast. Now, I kind of want to get into some questions about who you are, what kind of really inspires the business decisions that you make. Because you seem to have a lot, as you said yourself, empathy, kindness. And I'm really curious at what drives that in your business decisions. My guess is, as far as how you identify yourself, that's my guess. And I just want to see if I'm right. So I'll start by asking you to kind of give a quick bio of who you are in business, so our listener audience understand that. But then I want to get into who you are as a person after that.
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with a quick, brief discussion about your business experience to really set the context of why they should be listening to you and what your experience in doing business mergers and acquisitions as well.
So I wandered here from a very different point of view. Like, you know, a lot of folks that are in M&A and other things, you know, they have a high tier college education. They you know, been in investment banking and whatnot. That's not my background. So it's always funny. It's like, how far back do you go, right? So from a business point of view, I think the easiest place to start is I started my career in the 90s answering the phones for Microsoft and Dell. I literally started my you know, tech background. You know, thank you for calling Microsoft. This is Aaron. How can I help you? And back then, you could take a test, and if you passed the test, they would hire you for support. And then they would train you along the way. And I actually, you know, worked my way up in order to become a tier 3. I actually was put on the internally, it was referred to the irate team. So like, if you really got upset, you got transferred over to me. Externally, it was, you know, I want to talk to a manager. Well, managers can't troubleshoot computers. But you know, the irate team was, and really it's just I was able to do things or had a technical expertise that allowed me to take extra steps. You know, kind of fast forwarding, I had the opportunity to relocate to Osaka, Japan. And why I was there is a whole other story that we'll get into in another day. But why I was there, I started actually fixing computers and selling support for them, and really started an MSP. Managed service provider, you know, services for some language schools and some nightclubs and bars. And I grew that to a certain size. And then after 2.5 years, you know, my visa was up and I had to leave and was able to discontinue that. And I moved to Australia for a time and continued to actually, you know, work on that MSP, and then was able to sell all of it and some other things. And was able to, at the time I was actually trying to relocate to Brisbane, Australia permanently. It didn't work out and I ended up out in LA. And that's when I got involved with my first startup. And so worked there with a company called Casting Workbook to build out like streaming of the auditions and dailies. And by the way, this is like 2003, 2004 era. So like, you know, digital rights media, digital streaming, you know, dropping a clip in the inbox. This is all pre-YouTube, right? Was net new. And so, you know, did that for a bit and then ended up in San Francisco partnering on another managed service provider and system integrator, and, you know, had some great experiences there. And unfortunately, 2008 pretty much killed that business and a bad partnership. And so I ended up getting picked up by Verizon to work in their application outsourcing division. And so like I ran Lowe's.com at one point, I ran all of JetBlue's infrastructure at one point. And the way that it worked was very much like a sort of like a McKinsey, like you had to sell the opportunity, you had to hire the team that actually delivered on that opportunity. You were on site at the client. So, Verizon moved me out to North Carolina. I was on site at Lowe's. This is the 2009, 2010 era. It's when cloud starts becoming a thing as well, and so got heavily involved in a lot of what Verizon was doing around cloud, because at that point they also were looking to be. They had the network, they had the data centers. It made sense that they would also be a cloud player. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and they sold off that division later down the road. But my time there ended up building out and becoming a business consultant around different areas about using the solutions that Verizon had available to them in order to solve business problems, especially in e-commerce and other places. And so about that time, I had someone reach out to me and said, "Hey, we could really use some help to build out, our be a senior principal to build out a consulting practice around Google Cloud." Well, it wasn't Google Cloud back then, but Gmail and some of the other pieces. So I left and actually helped that company build out a practice around that, and turned around and actually sold Google to Verizon. Which I can actually talk about. And I got to work on some really amazing data center to cloud migration practices. Built that out. Went to another Google partner, did something similar. Both those partners have actually been sold. One was sold to Atos, the other one to another.
Excuse me, Aaron.
There's a lot going on.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just that a portion of your audio is coming a little distorted.
Oh, is it? Okay. Is that any better?
It's better now.
Okay. I think it's because I turned away from the mic.
Yeah. I was missing some things you said there about Google, but continue.
Yeah. So long story short, sorry, I never know what part should I ever highlight. And so, I got to work with Verizon. I got to work with some of Google's key partners and doing some amazing projects with them. I left that and got involved in VC startups. One of them, was a competitor to Databricks and Hortonworks, for those who may or may not know what that is. But, really what happened is I went from being a computer geek to a business geek, right? Because in each one of these, got to hire the team, got to put teams in place, had to take on go-to-market strategies, had to take on selling, had to take on how do I, talk to enterprise, Fortune 50s, right? Not even 500s, but Fortune 50s on how do we leverage technology? How do we, put the team in place? Who's going to scale on that? And then, sort of fast forwarding the last, W2 I had, I was basically head of ops and sales for an early stage ML AI company that was backed by M12, which is Microsoft's, and so, getting back to the personal part of it. So that's the business side. And I've also, another key point is, do you know what score.org is by chance?
Yes.
Okay. So for those who don't, it's actually it's free business mentorship for anybody that wants it. It's a nonprofit division of the Small Business Administration. And so I mentor between 3 or 5, business owners in the community at any given point on scale and sales and operations, so on and so forth. But for me, I kind of had this thing about, 3 years ago where I hit a rock top versus a rock bottom. I had all the brass rings. I had the title. I was a board member. I was working with a successful, startup. But, I didn't want to get out of bed. One of the things that I kind of became known for is being paired with, highly technical founders to help them scale. It was hard trying to, it wasn't mine trying to convince people to do the right thing, either from a cultural point of view, from an operations point of view, from a go-to-market point of view. Dealing with a lot of you need to have a bit of an ego to be a founder, and that's expected. And what an ego is armor. But what I ran into is there was just a lot of technical founders who would fight you on core business concepts or culture. And I personally believe that culture will, eat strategy any day of the week. You'll even hear it from a lot of people that talk about investments and whether it be VC investments, whether it be acquisitions, private capital, name it, they'll say, look, I'm investing in the team, the person, the what have you, right? Because if you can't execute, right, if you can't pull the right people around you, if you can't attract top talent, you're never going to succeed. It does not matter. Like, there are no field of dreams. There are no build it and they will come. Even so that you're seeing a shift in private equity to where they're really looking at what is that core team that's going to stay there, longer in order for them to get a return on their investment. Hopefully that answered the question. That was very long-winded. I am so sorry.
Well, no, it's a, coming from an IT background myself and being a former MCSE and, so a lot of things you mentioned I'm familiar with. So it's taking me a trip down memory lane as well. And I found it very interesting. But I definitely wanted to it set the context for who you are as a business person. Now I'm curious to know who you are as a person.
Sure.
And now let's talk about your album collections behind you. Because you definitely have an eclectic list of albums up there. So I'm just curious, starting off, do you have an album that you would point to and say, this is the one that if I'm in a mood, maybe it's a mood of, I don't want to say depression, maybe it's a mood coming off a client that just the energy wasn't right, you just need to kind of get yourself back into your space, you would put this album on and kind of that gets you back into who you are or
I will say that I hide a lot of memory and emotion in music. I don't play an instrument. I have not taken the patience to learn. I've tried playing electric bass and double bass multiple times, and it's just not meant to be. I'm not willing to put the amount of effort it would take for me to be, able to do something well. Let's put it that way, right? Given enough time and energy and effort, anyone can do almost anything. Right. So I guess to answer your question, like I'm a big jazz fan. It's not behind me right now, but I own an original pressing of a stereo pressing of Around Midnight by Miles Davis from, I believe, 62, 63. And I will not tell you or my wife what I spent on that record. But yeah, there's a lot of, for me on the albums, I want to listen to something that is going to sound better in analog than and that can be modern music. I mean, Cake was not, recorded analog, pretty, but the Ramones were right. And then some is just fun and the silly side of me, there's the punk rock Chickmunks and, the Smurfs album, right? I don't actually listen to those, but they're fun to have. But yeah, so, there are times where, that's a total New Order, right? Where I'll get into listening to that, and that, that's actually 4 albums, but the first 2 is it's not just New Order, it's also Joy Division, right? And for those who are audio geeks, they'll know the history there, but and so I'll get into that. But yeah, music will absolutely, has a dopamine effect on me. And there are different albums for different moods, whether I'm trying to stay in that mood or try to get out of it. But I need focus time. And the great thing is I have ADHD, and it's great to have music in the background, but it's also like, hey, when I need to take a break and flip over a record, it allows for me to like refocus. And so there is a little bit of method to the madness. And, during the pandemic, like we all needed dynamic backgrounds. And as I'm listening to things, I take something down and put something else up. And there's about 5 records deep on each one of those. And so like the wall completely changes. And so, and it also, like for these calls or interviews, you get to understand a little bit of my personality. And it truly is everything from EDM to hip hop to, rock and roll to, that's a Japanese album. Sorry. They're from the 1970s, which was a fusion funk, Japanese album. Right. And so, yeah, this is a bit of my quirky personality.
Well, it's a good way of introducing yourself as well. I'm a person that I would strive to be very observant, perceptive, And so I'm always looking at things when I walk in someone's office, pictures of the desk, for you, albums on the wall. I've never seen such a eclectic list of albums on the wall. First of all, albums, period.
Right.
That says a lot. Then they collected hip hop, the Ramones, Muddy Waters, blues, jazz. As you say, I see. I'm familiar with that Japanese jazz fusion album. Then I see Bonanza and Smurfs. So just when you think you kind of Swami, I forget his pronounce his name correctly, but a former Indian Swami talks about when you label me, you negate me.
Right.
And with your album coverage and the way you move, it shows that you really can't be labeled or put into a box.
It would be so much simpler if I could. We haven't even started talking about cars yet, so.
Well, I like the fact that you can't be. Yeah. I think a lot of times nowadays when I meet people, they're so surface. I use an analogy of swimming pools. It's like you see someone, they're like a kiddie pool. You can get in, they might be refreshing initially, but eventually you get bored because there's no depth. So you look for deeper pools again where you can explore more. And so you're one of those individuals where obviously even within an hour, I can get halfway into exploring you, which is a good thing because now it creates more curiosity, makes me want to dig a little deeper. And that curiosity definitely sparks interest and continue to want to build a relationship with you, because in my life, I learned that you're the type of individual that I see growth in other words, I can grow from the conversations, not just in business, but just in life in general, because if a person is going to be as eclectic as you, as far as you're listening, then I'm sure you're very eclectic as far as your food choices and places you traveled. So much more there as well, I'm sure.
And likewise, someone who's actually willing to explore, what I've gathered from you personally so far is that, you seek to understand, you seek for clarity, and you seek for definition, right? And someone who's going to start with, what is a human leader, and not give a definition, but just see what shows up, is also somebody that I want to get to know, right? Just because I do believe that words have meaning and create worlds. And so it's an interesting just to even have the conversation.
Well, thank you. And, and I really put a lot of thought into my questions I want to ask, and I haven't even gotten into the third question, to be honest.
I don't think you've asked me any of the questions you sent me.
And that's rare that this kind of actual interview goes. But your story has been so interesting. I didn't want to interrupt you. And when we talked about on our alignment call, I just kind of wanted you to share a little brief part of your history as well, because I'm talking about your childhood, where you grew up, things, places that you lived. Because I really think that really, to me, that sets the tone, at least from my perspective, to make me want to listen to you more as a business person, as opposed to someone who has this, maybe I've went to Columbia University as a business school, and you have all these degrees and experience with business, but you're not an interesting person outside that, where you're more of an interesting person initially, and that leads to want to be more interested and intrigued into your business world. So kind of share a little bit about how you grew up, places you've gone, and when you lived as well.
All right. So because it's such a high impact on my life. So I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. People often say like, where's your Texas accent? And it's there occasionally. Trust me, ask my wife, who's originally from the Northeast, and she still laughs at me when I didn't know the word for mooring. I grew up in a desert, right? So I had no idea what a mooring was. And so I was like, well, what do you call one of them cement balls that you throw in the water to tie your boat up to? And she's like, did you just say cement? I'm like, yeah. So, but no, it's I grew up mainly in a very Hispanic populated area. It's a joke, and hopefully nobody's offended about it, but people always ask, hey, was your Texas accent? It's like, oh, my accent be it wouldn't be y'all. And so my dad was a single father. I actually didn't meet my mom until sort of later in life, when I was 16. There's some involvement like in my early age, but I don't really know about it or remember it. Let's put it that way. I will often say I love my father, hate his taste in women. because I had two stepmothers that were not kind. Let's just put it that way, or nice. So, and there came an opportunity, and I have my grandparents who are not blood, but to me they're family. And my grandfather, he was head of the Southern Baptist Association in San Antonio, and kind of saw the situation that was kind of going on out in El Paso, of starting to get involved heavily with some gang activities and some other stuff. And I used to constantly have the crap kicked out of me for being the shade of white that I am, not being Hispanic. And, so I needed protection and started getting involved with some people that could provide protection that was not healthy. And so I had the opportunity to go to a boarding Baptist military school in Central Texas for high school. And I left at 14 and went there for all 4 years and never really went back. Just to be clear, like, my father is still a good friend of mine, like, love him dearly. He's still in that trailer that I grew up in, and I can't seem to get him out of it. And that's his choice. And those are his life choices. And I had to, make peace with that at one point, or at some point. But that experience and what my grandfather did for me to, pay for that school and got me a soccer and track scholarship, changed my trajectory. And that school was harder than any college course I ever took. And so that also had an effect. And what was interesting about that school was you had a combination of, rich kids that parents sent them to military school to try to straighten them out. You had a combination of kids whose parents worked for like Aramco that are in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, or Qatar, who, were sending their kids back to the United States because education stops at 8th grade in most of the Middle East. You had kids rich kids from Mexico that were being sent there for a better education in the United States. And then you also had a lot of, instead of going on probation, the state actually paid the school to send some kids there that came out of juvie. And so you had a very, very international, all different social, class, and all sorts of dysfunction, attending the school. But it was a military school and it taught us discipline. It was a college preparatory school. A lot of my classmates went on to Baylor and Rice and UT Austin and some other really good schools. And some of them went on to, Virginia Tech and West Point and other military backgrounds. It's actually one of the few regrets that I have in the fact that I never served. I was raised by Vietnam vets basically because they were in charge of the school. I mistook that what I had just gone through was literally 4 years of boot camp to what service would have looked like. And so that's one of the few regrets I have. And so from there, I went to Howard Payne University in Brownwood, Texas for 1 year. And it was the wrong college for me. It was out in the middle of nowhere. It's in Brownwood, Texas. It's actually a good school. I'm not knocking the school. I just was not a fit for that school, especially in the 90s. And so I dropped out after 1 year. I actually had two passions at that time. It was performing arts and computer science. And so I moved to Dallas. I got that job with Microsoft that I talked about. And I actually put myself through an actress conservatory. And so I then moved down to Austin and was working for Dell during the day and working in the theaters down on Congress at night. And then I got an opportunity to actually, and just full kimono, like I got an opportunity to be a professional stuntman in Osaka, Japan, and open up the Universal Studios Japan. And That's actually what took me out there. But because of the way the contract worked, you could only work 4 hours a day because of stunt work. So I started my own system integration and MSP company while I was there. And so that's when I got into entrepreneurship and whatnot. And so, but I will say that my father actually had the most influence on entrepreneurship because after the engine replacement shop closed, my dad tried at least 6 different avenues to be an entrepreneur. and failed at each one of them. And I can, knowing what I know now, I can even explain why that happened and what could have gone differently. But it took his toll on him. And what he ended up doing was, delivering newspaper for a living, which he still does today. And, and he's 70 and he's just like, this is what I do. And so it's one of the things though, like I can still have conversations with him to this day on complex business concepts. And not only is he right there with me, but he actually gives me sometimes some great advice. And yet, right, he lives below the poverty line, in a trailer park because he's stubborn and will not work for somebody else. But he's also not willing to take the risk and start his own thing. So that's about as open as I can possibly get about all that.
I appreciate it, and I thought I had an understanding of your journey until you took me to Japan and and it's like, wow.
We didn't even talk about Australia or Los Angeles and me meeting my wife in San Francisco, but
well, I know we should top an hour, and I definitely would love to have a second interview with you to really unpack some more, because you've done a great job of really, like I said, giving me a chance to see behind the curtain, so to speak, of who you are as an individual. And that's the reason why I want to interview you is anyway, because again, my whole premise behind the fully human movement that I'm advocating for is that I think in today's time, people want to connect with individuals who see beyond, I call forced tribalization. You and I talked about that. Tribes, I believe people are forced in to begin with based on your cultural givens. And then, of course, you choose whether or not you want to stay in that tribe or you're going to grow yourself. As a choice you make later on in life as you get older and more mature. But I love to connect with people who identify and behave as fully humans, that you can have a conversation with a total stranger, and from that conversation leave feeling more inspired, feeling more, I would say, just sum it up, feeling better about yourself, because what it helps you do is it helps you see that despite the noise out there in the world, the news painting such a negative light on everything, that there's still good people out there, still kind people out there, and still people out there who live and function in that kind of energy space. So it's been an honor.
Likewise, and thank you for having me.
One last question I have to ask you before we leave this, and then we'll schedule time for a second part. And this is just something that's just really curious to me. And that is there a project or initiative you've led that brought you to the deepest sense of fulfillment for you?
There's a couple, and every one of them is when I'm volunteering or giving back. And so definitely the work that I've done with SCORE and helping entrepreneurs kind of like figure out their way and what's next and what they're like. I just, I love that work. I've also been part of it's a Nicaraguan network that actually helps kids and people and families in need down in Nicaragua with education and access to food and shelter. And so I haven't been able to do it recently, but used to fly down there and help with building houses and distributing food and so on and so forth. And so, a long-term dream of mine is like, once I'm able to, get everything that I want to accomplish up and running and functioning and in some ways automated, I would love to, put 2 years, if it exists after current administration, but I'd love to put 2 years into the Peace Corps. I just really appreciate that mission of like, I'm showing up not for any other reason, but to be of service and help.
Love it. Love it. Well, last thing as we wrap up, any contact information you want to share with our listening audience so how they can get more information?
It's true. I should probably promote myself, right? So yeah, if you want to learn more about me or get in touch with, I have guideposts with an S.io. That's really kind of focused on business consulting. That's focused on the M&A stuff. So always looking for good companies to acquire, always looking to see how I can help founders get to the next level. So again, it's guidepost with an S .io. It's probably the easiest way. It's Aaron Friedman on LinkedIn if you want to get a hold of me that way. And so feel free.
All right. And thank you for that, Aaron. Listening audience, I will definitely put the links when we put the edited version back on the internet. There'll be links to all Aaron's contact information and his website. So with that, as we bring this show to a close, Aaron, thank you again for such a wonderful show. Definitely want to set up a time to schedule part 2 where we can really delve deep into some other questions that I believe that our listening audience will love to learn more about. But until then, again, I want to thank you for your investment of time and energy, and listening audience. Thank you for listening to another episode of King Connections. And until our next conversation, let's all continue to connect with intent. Thank you.
Thank you.